Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Today we're going to explore the topic of deep listening. Can you remember a time when you felt completely heard and understood by somebody who you were talking to? How did that make you feel? And what is it that the other person did or didn't do in order to communicate to you that they were there with you 100%, fully present? The act of listening, deeply listening, actively listening, can be really, really healing because it establishes a connection between the two souls who are talking to one another. How can we learn to extend this gift of deep listening to those who are around us? In our training as chaplains, we spend thousands of hours relearning this art of listening, subhanAllah. All the while, the answer is actually in our beautiful tradition. We know from the example and the model of our Prophet Muhammad, our beloved, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he was somebody who completely embodied this notion of deep listening. In the seerah and narrations, people reported that when they came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and sat in his presence, they felt like they were the most important person in the world to him, sallallahu alaihi. It was because of the way that he attended to them. For example, we know from narrations that he used to turn his entire body, his entire physical being, towards the person who was talking to them, locked in on them and them only, making them feel like he had no other place to be and nothing else to think about, nothing to distract him from the person, the soul, that was right in front of him at that moment. SubhanAllah. Even in our tradition, we talk about this concept of hudhur, or full or whole presence, bringing one's whole self into the act of worship. We are constantly asking our teachers, right? How can I improve or increase my capacity for khushu, for concentration, for focus in my salah, for example? How do I not get distracted by all of these things that I have to do next? How do I focus on being in the moment in my worship, having my heart be where my feet are at? That is a training for deep listening, subhanAllah. When you're sitting with somebody and they're sharing their story with you, my rule of thumb is don't interrupt. Wait until they finish speaking. And when you think they're finished, wait just a little bit longer. Silence and pockets of silence are okay and they're healthy. In fact, what they do is they give the other person a moment to let the words land and give themselves permission to regroup and maybe launch into a different part of the story that they hadn't been able to catch up with yet. When it is your turn to speak, it should not be to share our own experiences and our own stories saying, oh, I went through something like that, or I know somebody who went through something like that. It should not be to jump to giving advice or jumping to fix it. We all have this natural inclination to want to fix it right away and make the person feel better. But in that moment right then, that's not what the person needs, right? It shouldn't be to change the subject because we might be feeling uncomfortable around the topic that they're bringing up, or we don't want to face what it's making us feel inside while we're listening to them in pain or in suffering. Instead, try reflecting back to them exactly what you think you heard and you think you understood from their storytelling. For example, you can say, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're feeling angry, frustrated, upset, and pain because such and such and such. What that does is it gives the person an opportunity to hear their own words reflected back to them in order for them to either, if you got it right, feel affirmed and understood and yes, you got it exactly, that's what I meant, or a chance for them to say, not quite, and here's where I need to tweak your understanding a little bit. This is a kind of conversation of back and forth that lets the person know that you are completely absorbed in their story and the focus is on them. and not on ourselves, subhanAllah. Finally, you'll know that you've done work and an act of deep listening, of active listening, because by the end of it, you should feel pretty exhausted. Being present, wholly present, with full hudhur and khushu' and focus on the other person is very draining. But inshallah, I pray that Allah rewards you for your efforts, and I pray that Allah makes us all of those who embody this practice, this prophetic practice of deep listening and active listening as a gift that we extend to our fellow brothers and sisters who are in pain, who are in need, and who are asking just to be witnessed and just to have somebody hold their hand and accompany them as they try and figure it out. Ameen.